Draw My Life, Franklin D. Roosevelt. I mean, his life. Born Franklin Delano Roosevelt in Hyde Park, New York, on January 30th, 1882. But that's not really important. What is important, though, is he attended Harvard University and got his Bachelor of Arts in 1903 in history. He also attended Columbia University, but he dropped out. In 1907, he passed his New York bar exam, so that didn't really matter. Now, let's flash back 3 years earlier. On the year 1929, there was a major stock market crash, leading to the Great Depression, or as we'll call it in this video, GD. Here we have President Hoover fleeing the scene of presidency. He's like, deuces, I'm out, peace. But here comes FDR to sweep up the mess that was left at the Hoover administration. Lazy bum. Now, let's come back to 1932, 3 years later.
Many months later.
FDR is president after beating the lazy Hoover and becoming America's new hope. No, not that new hope. To solve the crisis of the GD, FDR had his 3 focuses, called the 3 R's. Essentially, it was recovery, relief, and reform. The first term, recovery, basically focuses on FDR closing the bank. The Emergency Banking Relief Act was passed, giving FDR the power to regulate banking transactions and foreign exchange. That looks like the French flag. Oh, what? Oh no, it's not the French flag. It's police lights, never mind. On April 5th, FDR ordered all private holdings of gold to be surrendered to the Treasury in exchange for paper currency. Later, on April 19th, he abandoned the gold standard. Congress responded to FDR's recommendations and canceled the gold payment clause in all contracts and authorized repayment in paper money, paving the way to a managed currency. In the recovery plan was the creation of the PWA and the NRA. Not that NRA, Stefan. This NRA worked with industries to lower labor hours so that employment can be spread to as many people as possible, with wages depending on productivity. Now, the PWA, the Public Workers Administration, normally worked on public buildings, highways, and parkways to help the employment relief. That's Bob the Builder, by the way. Now, finally, there's the Gold Reserve Act, which required all gold and all gold certificates held by the Federal Reserve to be surrendered and given to the Treasury. Now, the second R, which is relief. The Civilian Conservation Corps provided employment in fresh air government camps for about 3 million uniformed young men. The Federal Emergency Relief Act, whose aim was the immediate relief to provide work for employable people and the relief roles and have a diverse variety of relief programs. The Agricultural Adjustment Act made millions of dollars available to help many farmers meet their mortgages. Now, the Homeowners Loan Corporation refinanced mortgages on non-farm homes. It ultimately assisted about 1 million badly pinched households, which was really good. Now, the Civil Works Administration. The Civil Works Administration was designed to provide purely temporary jobs during the cold, cruel winter. The Federal Housing Administration allowed for small loans to householders, both to improving their dwelling and completing new ones. Now we have our third R, reform. The Beer and Wine Revenue Act. This act was the first relaxation of the prohibition laws since 1918. It permitted the sale of beer and wine. The second was the Tennessee Valley Authority Act. The agency discovered precisely how much the production and distribution of electricity costs and made it cheaper. The Federal Securities Act required stocks and bonds to be true. The Stegall Banking Reform Act limited commercial bank securities, activities, and affiliations within commercial banks and security firms. Securities and Exchange Commissions. This protected the public against fraud, deception, and inside manipulation. The Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act helped to lift American export trade. Lastly, the Indian Reorganization Act. This act encouraged tribes to establish local self-government and preserve their native crafts and traditions, not move them around. Now, let's pick up the pace since most acts have been passed and FDR wins this re-election. Spoiler alert, it's not the last time. Now, let's continue with the relief since there's no more recovering. The relief consisted of the Resettlement Administration, the Works Progress Administration, the Soil Conservation and Domestic Allotment Act, and the Second Agricultural Act. The Resettlement Administration removed farmless farmers to better lands after the Dust Bowl. The Workers' Progress Administration had the objective to employ people for useful projects like cricket control in Wyoming or monkey pen building in Oklahoma City. The Soil Conservation and Domestic Allotment Act withdrew areas of production by paying farmers to plant soil-conserving crops. The Second Agricultural Act did the same as the first one, and that's all the relief acts. So, the Reform Acts. They consisted of the Wagner Act, the Social Security Act, the Public Utility Holdings Company Act, the United States Housing Authority, the Fair Labor Standards Act, Reorganization Act, and the Hatch Act. The Wagner Act reasserted the right of labor to engage in self-organization and to bargain collectively through representatives. The Social Security Act instituted the Social Security, which gives between $1 and $85 per month to retired workers. The Public Utility Holdings Company Act delivered a death sentence to the Public Utility Holding Company, or supercorporations. The United States Housing Authority was an agency designed to lend money to states or communities for low-cost construction. The Fair Labor Standards Act dealt with industries involved in interstate commerce. They were to set up minimum wage and maximum hours levels. Reorganization Act gave FDR limited powers for administrative reforms, including the key new executive office in the White House. And finally, the Hatch Act. This act barred federal administration officials, except the highest policy-making officers, from active political campaigning and soliciting. Unless you've been living under a rock, this is Adolf Hitler. He killed plenty of people, and he was a big start to World War II. As you can see, in FDR's third term, he won most of the states. Basically, World War II, there was an atomic bomb, explosion, mass chaos. FDR ran for the fourth time for re-election, and of course he won it. On March 29, 1945, Roosevelt had been sitting for portrait painting and died. He said he had a massive pain in the back of his head. The doctor, Howard Bruin, diagnosed a massive cerebral hemorrhage, a stroke.